Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Kirsty and this is Stuck in the Mud. As ever, please remember to like the videos and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This helps my channel to grow and hopefully reach more people, as many people as I can, because that is what my aim is of this channel, is just to reach out to people suffering from OCD and anxiety and actually help them on the path to recovery. So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing alternative treatments to the gold standard to OCD, which is exposure and response prevention. Because we hear this all the time, that if you have OCD, the gold standard treatment is ERP. And whilst I agree that that is a very effective treatment for many people suffering from this disorder out there, people find it difficult. It's not easy. It's not an easy process to actually expose yourself to your fears and, go all in with exposure and response prevention. It's very daunting and overwhelming. And I hear from many people commenting on my channel that, they just found it too much. It was very overwhelming and, they just couldn't stick with it. They couldn't see it through. And I get that. Because it's very, very hard. It's debilitating going through this. And then you have to to get better, to actually, make those steps to get better, to actually, throw yourself into your fears, expose yourself to them. And so ERP, we're facing our fears, we're putting ourselves out there, and then we're encouraged then to not respond to them. We're not analysing them, trying to neutralise or suppress them. And whilst I fully agree this is a very effective form of therapy, I've used it myself and it has played its part in getting me to where I am today. However, I don't believe it is the ultimate therapy, that the only therapy that you can use and use it as a tool to get better and heal, because it wasn't the only thing I used with my therapist. I think originally with my first therapist back many years ago, I did CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy. And I don't believe it's very effective for OCD for a number of reasons, but we're kind of the opposite of the therapy that I've done that's worked for me. We're actually delving into our thoughts and, we're trying to reevaluate everything. And I don't feel that is, a great way to handle this, because we're actually encouraged to engage with our thoughts and feelings, and that ultimately is making everything bigger and more complex and confusing and producing more anxiety within us. So I don't believe, for me anyway, it was helpful. Not saying it is, it can be helpful for other people, but for me personally, it didn't help my OCD at all, and I still found myself back in the same kind of behaviours, and it didn't really get me to where I am today and where I needed to be. So with that, I went many years, still struggling along every day, going through the whole OCD cycle day in, day out, and it was just part of my life. It's just what I accepted my life was. And, sometimes it'd be worse than others. Sometimes it'd be to the point that, I was really struggling day to day to actually live and live without fear and worry all the time. And it's a terrible place to live. And then I found another therapist who has been amazing to me. She's a real gift to put me on the path to recovery. And it's took some time. This wasn't a quick thing with her, because I feel like initially, because at the time I didn't know what therapy I was doing. I can look back now, and I spoke to her about the therapy I did in the past, and she told me what I actually was doing. This is how I'd learn about different therapies. So initially, I do believe I was doing exposure and response prevention. This was especially when I was going through a really tough time with POCD and harm OCD. And I do believe, looking back, that's what she was doing, because I can see the process behind it. And, with exposure and response prevention, we are fully in there. We're putting ourselves in the position where we're being triggered by our fears, quite intentionally, and to then, not respond in the same way. And whilst that is brilliant, to do that, and, brilliant. If you can do that initially, that's great. If you can go all in there straight away, that's brilliant. And you will find peace. You will find recovery through that, because it does work for OCD. But many people, like I said earlier, they struggle with that. They struggle, just going right there to their fears straight away. And I think for me, that was why I struggled with, and I think that's why it wasn't as effective for me initially, because I was doing, all the rumination, all the analysing, all the trying to neutralise the thoughts as well. I was doing all the exposing myself to certain things, and, I think this is where a lot of people struggle with ERP, is they're doing all the exposures, but they're not following it up and doing the response prevention. We're not actually withholding all that. We're still ruminating. We still might be doing the rituals and the compulsions here and there, and it doesn't work. I can look back on what I used to do and realise that didn't work. We're not doing the therapy as we should, but it's hard, and I think because it's so hard to do that, and I get that, I understand it, and that's, I think, probably why I failed initially with that, because it's tough to kind of really to face those fears that are really controlling your life, and demanding your attention all the time, and giving you so much anxiety and panic and guilt and shame. Exposing yourself to those things is terrifying. It's scary. And, to do that straight away, especially when you might be in a really highly anxious state, you might be suffering from severe panic attacks. It's a lot. It's a lot of pressure, a lot of work to do that. And I can fully see why people fail at it, because it's hard. It's hard. That's the long and short of it, really. So then my therapy kind of changed, and I didn't really notice that, because she just kind of would do different things with me, and I guess she was trying to see, because I went back to her numerous times, and I think maybe she just felt it was time to try something new with me. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't understand what I was doing. I was just doing what she said. But it's only really towards the end of my time with her that, I asked, well, is this ERP? What am I doing? And she said, no, this is actually called detached mindfulness or metacognitive therapy. And I talk so much about this in my videos. But what I want to get across in this video is that if one particular therapy has, you've tried it and you can't do it for whatever reason, you're struggling with it and you feel like, what am I going to do now? There is other options. And this for me was life-changing, let me just tell you. And I'm glad I've had so much feedback. I've done many videos on this metacognitive therapy, and I go into much more detail. And people just, the response I get from people is that, wow, this is amazing. This is going to be life-changing for me. I've tried it, and, I really think this could work for me. And the amazing thing is, if you actually do it with a therapist, the sessions you would need to actually get this underway and in practice is about 10 to 12 sessions with a therapist. I know it's a lot. It's, especially if you're paying out to see a therapist, it's a lot of money. I am looking to do in the future. I'm not a licensed therapist as yet, but I am looking in the future to do coaching sessions. So, no one's saying anything different. In the stuff I learn in my therapy sessions is what I talk about in my videos. It's the same thing, nothing different is said. And I'm very knowledgeable on the subject because I've learned a lot about it. I've learned a lot about it through my own life experience, suffering from OCD and anxiety for 40 years. But I've also become quite knowledgeable on the subject just because I'm interested in helping others, get on track and actually, get their lives back from OCD. This doesn't have to be a life sentence. There is therapy that works. So with metacognitive therapy, it's a different therapy altogether. There can be similarities between many of the therapies, but there is definite differences with this one. Metacognition is thinking about, the way our thought processes, the way we will ruminate and analyze and go over things in our head. And, this was developed, this therapy, about changing the way we respond to our thoughts. We can, a lot of people with OCD and anxiety, we ruminate a lot. We go over things, we just analyze to death, things, just going over and over and over again, trying to come to some conclusion or certainty about it. And this is something that really did just transform the way I relate to my thoughts now. And I know you guys can too. And this is why I feel like I need to talk about this, because myself, I've noticed that this particular therapy isn't talked about an awful lot. And I don't really understand why, because it is so effective. They've actually done studies and put, metacognitive therapy against like exposure and response prevention. They're very similar in a lot of studies, and they do work for other mental health conditions. It's very broad ranging, it'll cover like depression, anxiety on its own, general anxiety disorder, PTSD, I think I said depression as well. So yeah, it covers a wide range of issues, and it can really change the way we relate to our thoughts. Our thoughts don't define us. And the aim of metacognitive therapy, it really is a do-nothing approach. And it sounds too good to be true. I'll be honest, hand on heart, when my, therapist was discussing it with me, I thought, this just sounds way too easy. This is just, how is this going to help? Because this is just too simple. How can, someone just say to you, let the thoughts be there, and move forward with your day? How, that's just too easy. If that's what therapy is, then, it's an easy job, because it just sounded so, but it's actually harder than it sounds. And I think, for me, I was just like, is this really going to work? I don't think so. I was just so dismissive at first. But I have gone through the whole process of metacognitive therapy and come out the other side and realised it's life-changing. It completely transforms, like I said, the way we relate to our thoughts, and it actually, our mind can self-regulate. I think when we have a mental health condition, that's it, that's our life now. It's just the way we're made, the way we're built. And there is an element to that. Don't shoot me down here. There is an element of that. I do think we're wired a bit differently, and maybe our life experiences impact that. Also, genetically, we're different, and we're more, I think, predisposed to certain mental health conditions. I do believe that is my case, especially on my maternal family line. And that's is what it is. It's not our fault that we suffer from these mental health conditions, but there is things we can do to help it. And, this doesn't, like I said, it doesn't have to control your whole life. It doesn't have to be a life sentence. There are ways that we can relate differently to our thoughts. And when I learned about metacognitive therapy and, actually put it into action myself, I was astonished at, if I'm really consistent with this, I see it. You see the evidence for yourself. You let the thoughts be there, the ones that are really, niggling you and just on at you all the time. If you can let them be there, you don't question it. You don't try and suppress it. You don't try and neutralize it. We don't try, we don't ruminate over it. We just let it hang out in our brain. We're aware of it. We let it hang out there. That sounds simple, but it's actually harder because, OCD doesn't give up. It wants to get your attention. It's just there all the time. Like, oh, what about this? What if this happens? What does this say about you? It's there, posing these questions all the time to try and get your attention and get you to engage with it. Now, with metacognitive therapy, we're supposed to leave it alone. We're aware of it. OCD wants certainty. It's the doubting disorder. It wants you to engage with it. But if we don't do that, it's going to be hard. It's not easy. But leaving it there alone and moving forward with our day, it fizzles out. It dissolves on its own. And it took me a while to really get to grips with that. I feel like I was engaging with it in different ways. It's the same with rituals. When OCD says, do this so many times or check this, it's wanting you to engage with it. And that's another thing. It's leaving those, rituals alone. And when you feel the urge to do a ritual, you kind of think, nope, not today, OCD. I know it's you. And it's just trying to be, you're more aware of your thought processes and what you're actually doing. And since I've become more aware of the way I think about things and my metacognitive beliefs around things, I've talked about this in a lot more depth in other videos, so you can watch those. But my metacognitive beliefs, you can change them. They can change. We think that and irrationally we know with OCD that these things don't prevent bad things from happening, for example. But we have that compulsion that we're compelled to do something about it, to whether to ruminate over it, to do a ritual or a compulsion, just to do something to control our life, to control our thoughts. We can't control our thoughts. Let's just say that you can't, but we can do something about the thinking part. And this is where we can self-regulate our mind to release those thoughts, release all that fear that we have. And it works, I said, against a broad range of mental health disorders. It's actually, I was reading an article recently saying it could be the best therapy for mental health disorders, depression as well, anxiety, all these others, and I really do believe that, because we can reprogram our brain to do another thing, to another way. And it's where I am now. I don't respond to my thoughts in the same way. I do get intrusive thoughts. Everybody gets intrusive thoughts. And maybe when you have OCD, you do feel like you get more. But the reason usually is because we involve ourselves in them. So the reason we get so many of them is because we're just constantly involving ourselves with the thoughts, the feelings in the body, the sensations. We respond to the fact that we may be feeling super anxious and trying to get rid of that feeling. Our brain recognizes that, hey, this is important. I need to take note of this and remember this. And that's why it feels so intense and so strong, and it takes over, because it grows, it gets bigger. And then we find ourselves just, it just keeps popping back. It doesn't ever go. We don't detach from it. It's always there. It's just growing bigger all the time. It gets very, very strong, and it gets very hard to let go. But once we can establish that, hey, I don't need to do this anymore. I'm aware what I'm doing. I am aware that this thought has popped in. It's a trigger thought. It's triggered me. I'm feeling a bit anxious. But then if I can sit through that and tolerate that anxiety, that anxiety will fade also, because you're going to feel a bit of, I've talked about this in videos before, you're going to feel pushback from OCD. OCD wants your attention. It doesn't like the fact that you're not doing what it wants you to do. So you're going to feel that probably increase in anxiety. You're probably going to feel worse before you get better. That's all normal. It's all part of healing and getting better. So I talk about many processes in which you can, bridge that gap between being aware of the intrusive thought or the feeling of needing to do a ritual, an urge to carry a ritual or compulsion out. We can think of it in many different ways. I've talked about this in length, like I said, in previous videos. So it's like telephone ringing, you don't answer it. Train comes into the station, you don't get on board. A toddler having a tantrum, that's a perfect one for me, because I have young children, and they want you to respond to them. They want you to give in to their demands, but you don't. And it will fizzle out. That tantrum will fizzle out. And that's like OCD. It will fizzle out and it will go away. And the toddler just forgets about it in half an hour, because you haven't giving into what they want, and it's the same with OCD. You don't give into what it wants and it will fade away. And people will often ask me, how do I do that? How do I sit with that thought? And it's not easy, and it's like, this is why, it sounds like the easiest therapy in the world, but it really isn't, because sitting with a thought that you're uncomfortable with, and, it can be a really, abhorrent thought that goes against your character as OCD sufferers. OCD goes for your values, what you value most in life, and will go against your moral compass. It's not you. It's all lies. OCD just wants to make you feel bad and make you question everything. That's OCD's aim. And the more we engage with it, the more it'll throw back at you. This is how OCD works. So it is a case of starving that monster that is OCD and not giving into what it wants, what it demands off you, and you do have to let those thoughts be there and let it be there and be really passive about it. Like, oh, okay, I know you're there, but not today. I'm moving forward. And you can hang out for as long as you want. And, the thought in the background, that urge to carry out that ritual, compulsion, but we don't engage with it. And it's amazing when you practice this and you realize it does go away, because I can have an intrusive thought in the morning and think, I'm going to be thinking about this all day. And then I think, nope, I'm not doing it today. It's just going to hang out there. And I can go back, I'll later on in the day, I'll be thinking back and thinking, that just went away. I thought that was going to be with me all day, and it wasn't, because I'd left it alone. So it does work, but it does take a lot of practice and consistency, and you do have to celebrate the small wins. You're going to have, times when you don't carry it out fully, and you maybe, you find yourself ruminating during the day, and you think, a lot of this is being kind to yourself as well. It's a big point part of getting better, and I really appreciate that more now I've come out the other side. Then when I was going through it, I didn't realise how much importance I think that really has, and the compassion for yourself, because this is tough. It's tough for anyone to go through, and when you suffer from this really intensely and severely, it's, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I really wouldn't. But as I've grown and I, really got to grips with metacognitive therapy, detached mindfulness, you realise that, you can, and naturally you will be exposed to your fears and triggers day to day. They pop up in everyday life, and that is, I guess, the exposure and response prevention part. We're exposed to it, and then we don't. But whereas in therapy, you're intentionally exposing yourself all the time, and that can just feel too much sometimes. It's a lot to take on board, and I don't discredit it, because it does work. But for me, it's definitely part of how I operate now. Like I said, I'll come into contact with maybe something triggering that I read online, or, and I do have to respond differently. And that's where the ERP really does work. And also parts of acceptance and commitment therapy do have to have a lot of acceptance with OCD, and that kindness to yourself and compassion. And I do incorporate all elements of that with how I live day to day now, and how I can just function normally and give myself freedom from, OCD and anxiety and the mental health disorders that have followed me from being a young child, from being a 5-year-old. It's really been the story of my life going through adulthood. It's always been there, and took me to some really dark times in my life, to a point where, I was never fully admitted to a mental health unit. I did come close 2 times, in my life, and, thankfully, I did manage to stay at home during those times. It wasn't considered the best option for me, and I did manage to stay home with a lot of support and people coming to visit me every day. And it's devastating, to be in that position and think that, how am I going to get better from this? I've tried numerous times. I've tried this therapy, tried that therapy. I've tried this medication, and nothing feels like it's working for me. It's devastating. And I would hate anyone to think that they've tried everything and, it's not working. And that's why I think it's important to discuss this therapy more, because I do feel like it really isn't spoken about enough. I don't think people are aware of it as much as other things. And maybe if something else has failed, don't give up. Just don't give up. There is other options. And if you haven't tried metacognitive therapy, detached mindfulness, try it, because from being a long-term sufferer of OCD and anxiety, this has given me my life back. I was at a point of non-functioning just 3 to 4 years ago, and I am back now trying to help others. And I know that this is something I never dreamed was possible for me. I never thought that this could be what I'm doing now in life. OCD would say to me, you can't help other people. How can you help other people? You're so scared of everything. For me to put myself out here like this I just couldn't comprehend it just even 2 years ago. And here I am now. So there is ways out of this. Like I said, you can't do anything about the thoughts that come in your head. You can't control those. And I think that's the problem with a lot of sufferers. We try and stop the thoughts. We try and suppress them. We try and get rid of them. And doing that is what makes them bounce back harder and stronger. Because, the more we try and get rid of something, the more the brain goes, that's important. I need to hang on to that. So you see what I'm saying? That's how the brain regulates itself. So it's like, okay, I need to remember this. I need to hang on. It's important. But if we just let it hang out, let those feelings hang out, the sensations, the urges, they just dissolve on their own. And it's quite amazing when you realize it works. And because if it's not working, there's something we're not doing. And I had to really grasp that along the way, that if it wasn't working, there's some kind of involvement I've got, whether it's, just a small, bit of rumination from time to time, that's feeding it. There's certain tweaks that you make along the way, and you realize that, hey, actually I wasn't doing that as I'm supposed to. And it just takes practice. It's just practice. And with more consistency, it does get easier, and you will notice the improvement. So please don't give up out there if you're struggling right now and you're feeling a bit like you've tried everything and you feel like you're just not getting anywhere. There is other options. You might not have heard of this, so it's great, if you haven't, and it's something you can try for your OCD and anxiety and other mental health conditions. It's not exclusive to OCD. It's, anxiety, depression, PTSD, or the mental health conditions. It really does work for a broad range of things. So don't give up. Remember, there's help out there. I'm hoping to do some one-to-one coaching sessions in the new year. I'm hoping, I'm trying to keep it affordable for everyone, because I do feel the problem right now in the world is, and I'm struggling myself, just trying to make ends meet with my family. It's hard. And to think that, these prices for mental health help, therapists, it's extortionate. And that's why I like to put these free videos on YouTube for people to look at and realize there is ways, and the exercises that I'll do on YouTube to help people see that they can do this. But if people need that more closer support, one-to-one support, I do feel that's something I could offer, and very small cost, because I don't feel that that it should be so extortionate. I know people study for years and to help people, but when you're at the bottom, you're at rock bottom, and you need that help, and it just doesn't feel available. Because I know in the UK waiting lists are horrendously long, and it can just feel like, how can I wait that long for help? How am I going to get there? So I do hope to be doing this, and I hope it's something that you guys will welcome. So please let me know in the comments what you've thought about today's video, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.